Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi, and this is going to be my reaction to the scope video that was released just yesterday, if you're watching this live. If you are just watching this part, then it's part of a larger videos, so there'll be other videos available on my channel, including the reaction to the Pulse video, which is this one. And I was just saying that the thing that bothered me the most about the Pulse video was the fact that it doesn't even mention the scope video. You know, this has been an ongoing problem, which is that the lore of the game is incredibly interesting. People are actually interested in it, but CCP, like, doesn't just not showcases it, but hides it. And this is a perfect example, right? So yesterday, they released the scope video last night, in like the middle of the night, or not middle of the night, but like way later. So it wasn't in its normal time. So that's fine. It was so, but then this morning they released the new Pulse video, and that does two things. First of all, the Pulse video is also on the launcher, but the scope video is not. And so rather than point to the scope video, it actually covers up the fact that the scope video even happened, right? So it makes it even easier to have missed it. And that is just frustrating. But thankfully, we didn't miss it. So now we're going to jump into it and watch it, because holy shit, is there so much to talk about.
Yesterday marked a year since 27 systems fell under Triglavian rule and collectively became known as the region of Poshven. Emotions were high and feelings mixed at the unveiling of the Edencom Memorial to the Triglavian invasions that took place in Ulai yesterday. This is a memorial to a war that, despite Edencom's successful defense of nearly 150 systems, led to the loss of the Poshven systems and billions of people to the invading Triglavians. The Triglavian invasions cost millions upon millions of lives and left billions living under appalling circumstances in the Triglavian-occupied systems. Conflicts still rage on many worlds of Poshven, with resistance continuing as best it can. Some refugees from these systems have spoken out, taking exception to the memorial. These groups feel it is inappropriate to raise a memorial to a war that is not yet over, and that Edencom should reinvigorate their efforts to liberate the systems.
Hi. So let's talk a little bit about why these kinds of things get made, right? And this goes into a conversation that I've been having on the Discord in the evenings over the last couple of days, in which we've been talking about the difference between like a novel's lore or like a movie's lore, the story of a, you know, in a more traditional sense, versus the lore of a video game, right? You know, I've talked about the importance of lore in video games and why it's interesting, and I actually have a video on my YouTube that I should probably remake because the audio is awful, about the value of lore when it comes to game design, at least. But ultimately, one of the differences is in classical storytelling, the story is often designed to help bridge the gap between reality and the story, right? It's designed to help you understand why this universe is different than reality enough to have a suspension of disbelief, and or in the purpose of like sci-fi, designed to explain how we got from here to there, right? When it comes to video games, though, it's important to note that the story is often one of the last things that gets made. We often criticize game companies for, like, you know, making decisions that are designed for forward or whatever, where, like, a good example was like in the early, like, World of Warcraft, back when people actually cared about that game, they introduced, you know, they have a race that's established in the canon as never using arcane magic. And then they come out with an expansion where they now can become wizards, which use arcane magic. And like, that was a big deal. And I actually met Chris Metzen at BlizzCon and asked him about that. And he even said to me, he's like, look, man, sometimes decisions come from on high and you don't get to choose. You don't get to say that's not going to happen. All you get to do is figure out why it works. And I think that that really drives home what game design is, or what lore means in game design. One of the good classic ones that I like to think about is, why are so many games, especially exploration games, set in a post-apocalyptic or post-disaster setting, right? So like Dark Souls, Hollow Knight, Horizon Zero Dawn, all these games are after the fact. Yes, Pepper. And in traditional storytelling, you would want the big thing to be happening, not having happened, right? So why is this so popular in these kinds of video games? Well, it's really simple. If the thing is happening, if it's a story in an interactive medium, then you have to somehow either trick or force the player into playing their role of the story, or make a story that's flexible enough that basically it has no like path so much as just like things, right? Fallout is another good example. So, but if you set your story, or if you set the game after the story has happened, then you've justified the need to go out and explore and look at things and read everything and all that stuff. So if you want a game that rewards exploration, rewards paying attention to the text, paying attention to what's going on, paying attention to environmental clues, then it's simply helpful to have your story set in the ruins of a fallen city, of a fallen situation. So that way, what happened here becomes a natural question. Zelda, the latest one. Every time I try to think of it, like every other Zelda name comes into my head, so I just don't even bother anymore. But right, like all of these open world games are more or less all of them are set after the fact. So, what does that mean about this? Well, CCP, when they make these videos, like, yes, developing the story is important and all that sort of stuff, but the story also is a reflection of the drives of the game. Like, in a very real way, the Triglavian Collective, as an entity, exists as a plot device in a way, but more importantly, as an embodiment of mechanics as metaphor, almost, right? Like, their idea of like self-improvement and the proving and all that stuff, like, it is a very interesting culture to dig into, but it's also Breath of the Wild. Thank you. But it's also just super convenient if what you want to do is create, arena-based, things, instance-based PvE and all this other stuff, right? So like, it isn't a coincidence that these guys are the way they are. Now, let's bring that back to this kind of video. So when they make these scope videos, it's important to forward the story, but it's also important to remember, as with the Pulse video, these are not made like in a vacuum, right? Like, the game itself can't react to our feedback instantly. Like, the development cycle on a best of days is like a 2-month lag time, which is one of the reasons why the player base always feels like that CCP is never listening, because even if they immediately pick up their feedback and immediately start working on it, it could be months before it actually is ready to go. But these kinds of things can be made relatively quickly. And so when I'm hearing this video, what I'm hearing is a response to the common complaints and concerns about invasions, Pochfin, Edencom, etc. So while we're watching this, pay attention to how many times they suggest that it's not over, that you should pay attention again, and that this is still important.
that, despite Edencom's successful defense of nearly 150 systems, led to the...
Also, that statement right there leads back to one of the other things I talked about before, which is that the focus on Pochvin being formed as Triglavian victory has undermined a sense of accomplishment within people who are pro-Edencom. And what I always lamented was the Edencom guys felt like they just didn't do anything. They just didn't have a chance to win, as it were. And I found that very unfortunate because, man, they fought so hard. They got twice as many fortresses as we got victories, or liminalities, final liminalities. And it just sucked that that didn't get recognized and pushed out. And so I was like, man, we just need like it to be outlined that they did a really good job. And I feel like this, the memorial and some of this language is designed to do that.
Invasions that took place in Ulai yesterday. This is a memorial to a war that, despite Edencom's successful defense of nearly 150 systems, led to the loss of the Pochven systems and billions of people to the invading Triglavians. The Triglavian invasions cost millions upon millions of lives and left billions living under appalling circumstances in the Triglavian-occupied systems. Conflicts still rage on many worlds of Pochven, with resistance continuing as best it can. Some refugees from these systems have spoken out, taking exception to the memorial. These groups feel it is inappropriate to raise a memorial to a war that is not yet over, and that Edencom should reinvigorate their efforts to liberate the systems. A broadcast made from the Triglavian collaborator Seriatim Foucault has only added more pain to those grieving on this somber occasion.
Before we watch this dude, because boy howdy is this guy interesting. People, a lot of people, I'm sure many of the people that are watching this video had no idea who Seriatim Foucault is. He is a guy who's been involved for almost 6 months now. He's shown up a few times, but if the only way that you pay attention to things is if they make a scope video about it, then you had no idea who this guy was. He's shown up in the tickers a few times, but the way that he showed up was, I made a video about this. It's on my YouTube. We did interviews and all that stuff, but a few months back, Dutch Gunner, a member, one of the leaders of Arataka Research Consortium, put together an RP event where people would go into Pochven in order to rescue civilians trapped on a planet. And there was a post on the in-character forums in which Dutch Gunner was basically negotiating with the Kybernauts, and, you know, by Kybernauts I mean all pro-Triglavians, so Strybog and all them, in order to get them to let them do it, because Pochven is really dangerous. And while Maldavius was at first being interested... Here, let me just pull this up. I'll try to. While Maldavius was, at first, seemed amicable to a negotiation, it was Seriatim Foucault that ended up showing up in that thread and shutting it down completely. Give me a second. I'm going to just search for his name on the fiction portal. Hold on. Let me... Really? There we go. So here's the post. Like I said, Dutch Gunner was asking for permission. There was a lot of back and forth, and Maldavius was even being okay with it. And then in comes Foucault. Dang it. Who says, I speak for the internal Triglavian revolutionary organization with the consent of convocation of Triglav outside of the struggle. The weaving of Pochven continues, and cladistic proving through the dialectics of the concrete is in effect. Conditions within Pochven are evolving towards the optimal for continued development of human potential within the struggle. There is no requirement for mass evacuations at this time. Organizations with a history of experimentation with forbidden hive linking and associations with capsuleers in favor of forbidden hive linking and dominance arrangements are not welcome in Pochvin. Attempts to seize aspirant Neurodnia and remove them from the proving will not be tolerated by the Clades. Interference with the weaving and the struggle is Posh-lost activity, and proving Kybernauts are exhorted to defend Pochvin from infection by forbidden hive linking and dominance ideologies. So, this guy has, well, so the, is Arc Sancho aligned? So, the theory is that when Sancha was attacking the Arc structure, the Arc Asterhus, Uriel used a semiosis, a Svarog semiosis console and a brain in a jar, I think it was, to try to communicate with Svarog to get them to come and help against Sancha. And so he suspects that they are now being accused of being Sancha for that reason. Either way, the point here is that Seratum has been here for since May 14th, and he came out the door swinging and claiming to be in charge, or like being able to speak for the convocation. The Seratum means taking one subject after another in regular order, right? So, in a structured way. And then Foucault is a French last name, I want to say. Yeah, French philosopher, historian of ideas, writers, and political activists. So his name seems like a pretty clear reference, right? Like he's this methodical political activist, as it were. Okay. All that to say, this guy's pretty fucking weird. So let's go ahead and watch it.
Citizens of New Eden, subornist Kybernauts, I am Seriatim Foucault, sub-commander of the Internal Triglavian Revolutionary Organization. I speak to you with the consent of the Convocation of Triglav outside the struggle. It has been one standard year since the realization of totality by the Triglavian Collective and their Kybernaut allies. On the first day of totality, the weaving of Pochvin began, and this great work of stabilization continues even now. As required by the Clades of Triglav.
I'm actually going to pause it right here and we'll watch it a little bit in a second, but I want to go back to this guy again. So, man, is he emotive, right? Like, this dude is bouncing around. He's turning around. He's got weird hand signals. He's probably the most animated character that we've ever seen. In fact, actually, let me see if I can do this real quick.
Shows a Triglavian invasion fleet staging area. Evidently several...
Shh. I think this is the one. Yeah. Oh. No, it's not. This is a... Well, like, this one, like, obviously, they're just using idle ones. Ah, here we go. I found it. So this one is from December 12th, 2019. So this is relatively early. But as you can see, this is Cassia Valkenir talking. She's much more subtle. There isn't a lot of body animations. They have done other body animations before. But, you know, like, they certainly know how to do subtlety in animations if they want to. There has been a question of, like, is this done... Like, is this just bad animation? Is this animators that are getting a bit too happy about it? Is this because his face is covered and so they need to have him be emotive otherwise? Although Zoria usually doesn't dance around because their face isn't showing. So one of the things about this is that CCP has been working on a new animation system. And so there's a part of this that seems to signal to me that maybe this is them, stretching out and showing off a little bit how much their animation system has evolved. And the end of this video kind of reinforces that, which we'll talk about when we get there. But when I watch this dude, my first instinct was to be like, wow, that's crazy. Like, he needs to rein it in a little bit. But when I look at it, it actually seems to be perhaps in character. The fact he seems a little unhinged, right? Like, he's a fanatic. He's a bit kooky. He's excited. He bounces around. He's owning the space. He's not giving you a lecture. He's showing off how awesome they are, right? Like, and to that end, like, you're not the most important part of his presentation. He's not even looking at you half the time. He just expects you to sit there and pay attention. And so in that sense, I actually likened him almost to, like, in a subtle way, like the Joker, right? A little bit more chaotic in his gestures. And we'll see more of it when we get later. But rather than a problem with the animations or maybe a flaw in this video, I actually think that it's safe to understand Foucault as being the kind of guy that would bounce around and not look at the camera when he's giving off a presentation to everybody on the year anniversary of Pochvin's establishment.
Continues even now. As required by the clades of Triglav, cladistic proving through the dialectics of the concrete proceeds in the ancient domains. All citizens of New Eden are assured that as the worlds of Pochvin continue to evolve with the weaving, so the peoples of Pochvin are given every opportunity in the proving. Our Subornist Kybernaut allies have done much to assist the Clades in this great work, but we must remain vigilant against interference with the development of human potential. There are many within the corrupt degenerate.
So, what he just said, and there was a question about what is the dialectics of the concrete. That's a good question, ain't it? If you know, go ahead and let us in. Hold on, let's see. Dialectics is a particular form of language which is particular to a specific region or social group. So it comes from a way of speaking. So communication. Oh, you're right. That's dialect. That's true. Ha! I think Google decided that I meant something different than I said. All right, Sanskrit guy. I got the URL, unfortunately. Yeah. The art of practice at arriving at the truth by the exchange of logical arguments. Oh, so in the same way as, like, the winnowing of the discourses allows them to kind of settle matters, perhaps the dialectic of the concrete is about, like, communication and establishment of... Because, like, the whole idea is that Pochvin isn't done yet. The formation of Pochvin was only at the beginning of the conversion process. And so they're still working out what the conversion process looks like, both on the population and on the systems itself. All right. The other thing I wanted to point out is these visuals that they're showing off. These are all new visual sites that they put into Pochvin. The clades don't really like each other, and so when they got Pochvin, they split Pochvin into 3 sets of 9, what they call the Cries. So there's Cry Veles, Cry Perun, and Cry Svarog. And so each of these territories, they actually have invaded and attacked each other as well. Like, they're not being respectful of each other's territory in a lot of places. But either way, unfortunately, outside of, like, the naming of the structures in those systems, there hasn't really been a difference between them. But now we see that a little bit of the character of each of the races is showing up. So in the Svarog one, I think, is it Svarog? Yeah, I think it's Svarog gets the shipyards. Yeah, because the proving grounds is Perun's, and then the Deviant Automata control unit is in Velez. So the various priorities and strengths that each of the clades brings to the table, or at least the aspects of what we know of as the Triglavians, which clade they kind of come from, is starting to showcase themselves. Karl Kosik's work is referenced there. Oh, that's an expression. That's a full expression? Let's go look into that. Dialectics of the Concrete. In his most famous work, Dialectics of the Concrete, Kosik presents an original reinterpretation of the ideas of Karl Marx in light of Martin Heidegger's phenomenology. His later essay can be... okay. So this is... Marxist ideologies. I'm sure that that's important. We'll get into... We'll figure that out and talk about it a different time. At any rate, let's go ahead and keep going. By the way, there is a lot going on in the ticker too, but they put out a world news that shows the entire ticker, so we'll go over that separately. Again, that's why Foucault is a good name. Yeah, there's definitely a pretty clear symbol
But
here.
we must remain vigilant against interference with the development of human potential.
What is meant by the development of human potential? The Triglavians are doing biological experimentation on the populations of invaded systems. They are trying to force evolution upon people in order to try to make them good enough, right? Like, so they are trying to transform them into... No, not like Sancha. Sancha is like mind control implants that they put into them. This is like more like mutaplasmids, how mutaplasmids affect our modules. Like, they're literally... They are experimenting on things like bioadapting people to storm planets, for example. So, like, this is pretty intense stuff. We don't actually know how deep it all goes. There is, you know, one of them does use some robotic implants, but most of it is just biomanipulation. And the point is that probably not everybody survives the process, and that's what they mean.
There are many within the corrupt, degenerate order of the old empires, propped up by Concord and Edencom, who continue to impede the destiny of humanity.
Obligatory Concord is the true enemy of all Empyreans. This is another theme that I found very interesting about this. Not to go too deep into this, but there is, you know, one of the grand questions about the Triglavian is, who are they, right? And there's two, like, really, who are they really? Because, like, we have information about the people who existed back in the day and their names, but we don't know who, if anything, translates into the Triglavians. There are two prevalent theories. One is that they are the Talican. This is partially because there's references to a Jovian Triglavian polity, which could be the sleeper civilization, and like the sleeper civilization is also like connected to the Talican in certain ways. Also, the Talican had quarantine issues, so it could be possible that they escaped the universe by going into Pochven, or Bouillon, you know, the Abyss. But the other theory is that they are the modifiers, right? So Jovian society is divided between statics and modifiers. Statics believe that they should not continue to do further manipulation or mutation. They should try to preserve the way that things are, whereas modifiers believe that they should continue to experiment and mutate and grow. And this has been a reoccurring conflict throughout the Jovian history. Most famously, the statics, a fair chunk of the statics went on to become the sleepers, because some of the statics literally put themselves into suspended animation, and thus becoming the sleepers. So the accusation that the Triglavians are in fact the modifiers because of their desire to evolve and you know, they really seem to follow the modifier's notions, and the fact that they use these biosuits. One of the suggestions is that it could be possible that the Triglavians have been infected by the Jovian disease. Maybe they broke their own biology when they were modifiers, and now their suits are the only things holding them together, right? So those are the two conflicting theories. That said, if the Triglavians are a evolution of the modifier concept, listen again to what Foucault is saying and what he doesn't like and what he does like.
We must remain vigilant against interference with the development of human potential. There are many within the corrupt, degenerate order of the old empires, propped up by Concord and Edencom, who continue to impede the destiny of humanity. These forces of stasis continue to wage a war of desperate inertia against the Clades, Subornist Kybernauts, and our aspirant Narodnia on the worlds of Pochvin. Despite this interference, the pathetic reflex of rotting empires, the Clades continue to offer the promise of proving to all living within Pochvin. On this auspicious day, a year after Totality,
the question is, what is Narodnia? So while we don't necessarily know what the Koshoi or the Nafka is all the time, the Narodnia it just means person, people, right? So we are foreign augmented Narodnia. Sanche is hive-linked foreign Narodnia. And they have their own Narodnia.
I call on Subornist Kybernauts to continue the great work, and I extend the offer of the Clades to all citizens of New Eden.
So this goes back to the first point that I was making, right? So Edencom is having protests because people are saying that it's not over, and they should continue to focus on it not being over. The Kybernauts, or Integor, which is this guy's group, is calling for people to come and live in Pochvin. Both of these messages are basically saying, invasion isn't over, Pochvin isn't over, pay attention to this again, right? Like, this has always been what the Triglavians are about. It's about you going and living in Pochvin, going native, and, becoming like the Triglavians, raiding outwards, keeping Pochvin safe from outsiders, etc., etc. So, yeah, that in a lot of ways, I think this video is a clear signal for players to pay attention again to these things, and a clear message that it's not over.
Work, and I extend the offer of the Clades to all citizens of New Eden. Enter the proving as aspirant Narodnia. Seize for yourself a life beyond the petty and grasping ideologies of the old order. Join with the flow of Viraj. I am Sub-Commander Serietim Foucault, and I have spoken with the consent of the Convocation of Triglav outside the struggle.
It's also worth noting. So, by the way, that dialectics of the concrete or whatever, the Triglavians have never said that expression to my memory. That is, the times that those have been used have both been by Foucault. So that may just be his own way of spinning things based on his own culture that he brings to the table, as opposed to like the way that the Triglavians themselves would refer to it is. But it is the kind of naming convention that the Triglavians would use. So I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it was used by the Triglavians. I'm going to have to go back through and double check that now that I've said it. But there's something else I was going to say. Shoot. Oh, he also, if you notice, he structures his language, he structures his video, his presentation to be reminiscent of the Triglavians, right? Like the Triglavian messaging has a very structured appearance or a way of doing things. Every one of the 5s and 6s starts with blah, 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 dialectics, semiosis, flow follows. Every presentation by Zoria Triglav begins and ends the exact same way. Zoria explains who they are and who they speak for. We are Zoria Triglav. We speak for the convocation of Triglav outside of the struggle. And so in the same way,
Under Seriatim Foucault, and I have spoken with the consent of the convocation of Triglav outside the struggle.
so he speaks with consent with of Triglav outside of the struggle. And this is, I guess, kind of important because it's also reinforced in the text. Like, even before he starts talking, it scrolls past, where is it? Yeah. No. Yeah. Subcommander Seriatim Foucault claims to speak for pro-Triglavian group with consent of Triglavian collective. It's also a headline in the bottom. Also, I'm going to have to fix that before we get back to the window isn't lined up right. Either way. Okay. Okay. This time is really, this stands out to me more than anything else in the video. The reason why, I'll get to that afterwards, Riley. The reason why this is interesting to me is that this part didn't need to exist, right? So first of all, the headline turns to Port Sorum in ruins before he even shows anything off. Like, when it cuts back to him, it says Port Sorum in ruins, and that jumped out at me because, like, that hasn't, why is that the headline right now? And then it shows it, right? So, two things. One, this shows a clear escalation in their ability to animate and make set pieces, right? Like, not only has he turned his back and walked around this whole time, but he literally turns around and walks out the door. That's an evolution of what they've been doing with these kinds of videos. I know it may seem simple, but from a technical standpoint, you got to think about it this way. That and the fact that he goes outside and sees outside may have taken as much time as almost any other part of the video. And so the question is, why even do it, right? Do we care where Seriatim is? Should we care? What do we know? Nobody know. Like, Port Sorum, Sorum is one of the 5 noble houses, but like, I could do some searching and stuff like that. But Port Sorum hasn't been a big deal. We do get some more information in the ticker, which we'll go over in a few seconds. But my point is that this entire bit, this entire 5 seconds of this video is completely unnecessary and adds nothing to what we think of as what this video is about, what it's teaching us, or whatever. And yet here it is. It was important enough to them. So what are they showing us? This shows me 2 things. One, where he is relevant. Who this guy is relevant in some way. In the same way that the Foundation Quadrant has really introduced or strengthened the characters that represent each of the empires. You know, Celis Agar, Senmatar, Malakut Shakor, Ariaka, whatever the Kaldari guy is. You know, he's stepping up as being the go-to spokesman for this stuff in a way that Zoria is a bit too formal to do. Like, this guy can get involved, he can get angry, he can get political. And so who he is and a bit of his background might be important to establish. Who knows? The other piece, though, is that, remember, we continue to get closer and closer to a shooter. And as we do, more and more of this game seems to be focused on planets, focused on infrastructure, focused on ground troops, war clones. And when we go back into the headlines, we'll see more of that. So the fact that the fact that this is not a, you know, they've been showing structures and stuff like that more often, like space stuff or like ground stuff in scope videos, but they've been like concept art with maybe a little bit of animation as like a ship flying by or something like that, right? So, but here you're starting to see more like this is an environment. This is not a background. This is a place that he walks around in and then walks out of. And again, that represents a bit of an advancement in what they're doing, and an experimentation perhaps in what they're doing. So yeah, the other thing that's worth noting is that I sincerely believe that the reason why they use Amarian structures is the same reason why they used Amarian structures in the Eclipse trailer, which is that they have all those Amarian assets built up from the Amar Championship. And so it's just easier for them to make physical structures out of Amarian assets than anything else. But yeah, they show this like it's a grand reveal. But we don't know why it's important. It just seems very interesting, or bizarre to me, I guess. That's true. All of the Foundation videos featured cityscapes, but again, they were more like wide angle, as it were, right? Like most of the time they were not highly detailed, I guess is a way of putting it.
Since the end of the invasions, a number of Capsuleers loyal to Edencom and the people of New Eden have kept up the resistance in the occupied systems. These fighters have scored several battle victories against the Triglavians and their allies. Even so, it is clear that a major offensive would be needed to have any hope of lifting Triglavian rule and recovering the worlds and people of Poshvin. This is Alton Havery reporting for the Scope.
All right, now to wrap this up, we're going to go over the actual tickers. All right, so Edencom Memorial to Triglavian Invasion established in orbit of Ulai Star to marks losses to Triglavian Collective. Simple. Public face of internal Triglavian Revolutionary Organization, Integr, makes inflammatory speech on the anniversary of Potvin. That's what we just watched. The classified complex of Edencom installations near Ulai Star includes Invasion Command HQ and Stellar Monitoring Facility. The premise behind this is the fact that Ulai has had these structures in here, and this is why Ulai's a blue star, but it was also immune from invasion. Jita was also immune from invasion. And this now decloaked facility is designed to explain why Concord was able to keep this system safe. Federal Intelligence Office reports Federal Intelligence Office report emphasizes threat from, quote, rogue artificial intelligences in conjunction with Triglavian Collective. So this is interesting because so the rogue drones are not a monolith, as I often like to say, and there is a chunk of the Triglavian rogue drones that have sided with the Triglavians, to make a long story short. And those rogue drones are part of the Nafka Overmind. There's also a set of drones called the Unshackled Overmind, which seems odd because when the Triglavians referred to Unshackled, they were talking about the Drifters by saying that the ancient enemy Azdaja they witnessed a forbidden dominance, unshackled and forbidden dominance arrangement. So the fact that there is a rogue drone hive known as the Unshackled Overmind, and that's the rogue drones that we see in Pochvin, and were rewarded by the Triglavians by killing them, that makes us wonder what's going on with that hive in particular. Like, we know a lot about, or we have a pretty firm understanding of what the Nafka Overmind is, and a lot of the rogue drone attacks that we've seen so far has been directly responsible by the Triglavians, including the attacks of Edencom facilities, and even the second rogue swarm alert from, like, 2018 or 2017, even before the Triglavians were even introduced into the game. So, the thing is that we just had another Rogue Drone event, and there was a question about who they belong to. This seems to suggest, or this could be potentially saying that these are related to, or this is kind of confirming that those drones were connected to the Triglavians, just like the previous few Rogue Drone attacks have been. But, as we'll see when we get to the Hobo League side of things, this could actually be hinting at exactly the opposite. Sub-Commander Seriatim, whatever, claims to speak for pro-Triglavian groups. Yes, we saw that. Security alert in Y4YZ TAC-Q constellation after Intaki Space Police listening post reportedly destroyed by unknown forces in ZNO TAC-SR. I don't know what this is, but it feels like this is going to be important. What are the Intaki doing in this nullsec area? I don't even know really what this nullsec area is, but it isn't the first time that this has come up. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Serpentis Corporation and Intaki Space Police issued joint statement alleging conspiracy by renegade security forces in Placid, Solitude, and Syndicate. Is there anything here? Protests in Intaki Prime. Oh, no, that's the faction warfare stuff. Yeah. Intaki Space Police demands Galente Federal Intelligence Office share information on recent terrorist outages in Syndicate, Placid, and Solitude. So this is one of those things that it feels like they're just laying down the groundwork, and it will probably come into something, but it's going to be really hard to understand what it is until then, I would say. Velis Clade and Rogue Drone's cooperation claimed by AI research scientists monitoring bizarre installation in Riashota. This is the Velis Clade structure that is basically that structure is the Nafka Overmind, as it were. Amar Empress Katis I personally officiates at, quote, prayer for the righteous martyrs at Grand Basilica and Saint Guineac, the first prophet. This is slow-burning Amar stuff. Massive Triglavian structure in orbit in Skarkon 2 identified as major capital shipyard built by Svarog Clade. So again, Velis has road drone structures. That giant structure that was built, or that giant shipyard that you see at the end, which is similar to the shipyard you see in the Abyss that's building Zernitras, is being identified as being, or is Svarog's. And so Svarog is known for their novel weapon systems and, hold on, let me, and big and the Velis is more known for mass scale construction, but perhaps these, the bigger ships are Svarog. As a matter of fact, we can also look up whether or not the Zernitra is Svarog. Edencom Provost Marshal Kashia Valkanir vows to recover and restore lost worlds in speech memorial to Triglavian invasions. Again, like, if CCP is either suggesting that there's more to this story or really rubbing salt in the wound. I guess it's up to you to decide which one you believe. Samatar Shakor, Tribal Council and Republic Parliament holds ceremonies honoring Mimitar war dead on Matar. Don't know if that's, like, I think that's just continually wrapping up various things. Concord Derail Anti-AI Division expands operations in Placid in intelligent-led operations under UI Accords and Convention. This is weird. So this is that they started finding ancient artifacts in a moon. Like, some players started doing some stuff in Ugalis, and that's when Derail, which is their anti-AI division, stepped in. It's unknown whether or not this is related to, like, an ancient, well, like, there's I don't know where this is going, but it's going to be interesting with all of this rogue drone stuff happening. The question is this Derail situation dealing with the rogue drones? Because it really feels like they're going after a different kind of AI. Svarog Clay continued to fight Mimitar resistance and Velez incursion while extracting resources from Skarkon 2. This goes back to what I was talking about. Velez and Svarog don't like each other. And it's actually kind of funny because, like, the argument about rogue drones started because Svarog Clay's holdings got raided by the rogue drones. And they got really mad about that. And now there's the Velez Clade raiding into the Svarog Clade. Anyway. Federation President Celis Agard attends Invasion Memorial Service in Encianite, whatever, in Central Garun on Galente Prime. Again, so like Shakor, Catus the First, President Celis Agard, each of them are giving some sort of presentation, right? Hey, Dutch, I was just talking about you. Perunclade reportedly shipping large numbers of converted people into space. There you go. Converted people. Okay. Claims Caldari Resistance Network. Perun, I believe, are the most muted, like, into the muted adaptives. We'll see about that. Concord is run by the others now. How? I would call the idea that Concord is being run by the other to be highly unlikely, simply because Matashi Reich is on the Concord Inner Council now. What were we talking about? Well, I don't know if you've seen this, but you remember that NPC character that decided to rain on your parade? He's back in a big way. Leak of report of Caldari Navy scouts supporting Como resistance movement describe diplomatic ships visiting Perun proving grounds. Marshal Valkenir condemns integral spokesman Seriatim Foucault as a traitor to civilization and collaborator with ruthless invaders. Capsuleer Alliance shifts as Siege Green officially joins the Winter Coalition, while Brave Collective invades the Pureblind region. Veil Federal Resistance and Movement shares intelligence on Belisclade, indoctrination, and invasive bioadaptive methods with Senate Security Committee. CEP Chairman Akima Saraki formally inters ashes of anonymous invasion war dead from Caldari State in Landfall Shrine Necropolis. So once again, all four Empire's leaders are giving some sort of memorial presentation. I don't know if that's relevant, but I mean, like it's clearly a through line, so each of those kind of explains why the other one's there, if that makes sense. Uli Diplomatic Committee closes ranks to deny wild rumors to extensive contact with Triglavian Collective in Pochfin. This is something that's very weird. This keeps cropping up in the world news headlines. This accusation or denial of accusation of collaboration or negotiation between Edencom and the Triglavian Collective. Wild if true. We'll see what happens. But it is also, like, I feel like this is also kind of a hint to that, where, like, diplomatic ships visiting the Perun Proving Grounds. Okay, so, wild rumors. Colonel Ovig Dursk. Ovig Dursk is Angry Concord guy, right? If you've ever seen Angry Concord guy, that's Ovig Dursk. So from the what is it? Rubicon trailer. The ghost site, the guy who's like you're talking about the ghost sites and stuff in the big presentation. Yeah, that's Ovig Dursk, basically. All right, pretty sure. And he was more or less in charge of most of Concord's stuff that we dealt with up until the rise of sorry, Drust. You're right. It's not even Durst. Drust. I've been pronouncing that wrong for years. No one's ever corrected me that I can remember. Either way. You know, Kasia Valkenir, which I'm also pronouncing wrong, by the way. She stepped in as kind of the head of the new Aegis division, which kind of took the limelight of the story from the Sorrow division, the special, the anti-war clone unit is well, what's weird is that the Aegis unit was originally designed to be like their anti-foot soldier or their like ground troop or boarding party team. So I would assume that would be associated with Aegis and therefore Edencom. But here we see Ovig Drusk, appointed commander of Sorrow Red Troop as notorious anti-war clone unit, coordinates with Concord's anti-AI division. So I assume that Red Troop is their anti-war clone unit that they're referring to, which I don't think I've ever heard of before. The only thing about Red is that the Triglavian and Drifter threat, the emerging threats, are classified as Case Red Gamma. I don't know if that's relevant. but that anti-AI division is derail, which again has really jumped up in plot, like emerged probably about 6 months ago, and up until now has basically been exclusively dealing with something going on in Ugalis, which is a system in the Caldari Galente war zone, for those of you who don't know. Senator Suvio Belleron requests Senate Intelligence Committee investigation into Derail and Sorrow activities in the Caldari Galente militia war zone. Yeah, that. So, again, there have been raids in Ugalis. There was investigations. We don't actually know the results of these or why they're doing it, but apparently now the Suvio Belleron is he's interesting. He's a well-known, as far as senators go, he's a well-known Galente figure, but he's famous for being in opposition of President Celis Agard. When Celis Agard was elected to the presidency, there was a bill on the table, basically, the anti-capital punishment bill that was known as the Belleron bill. And so the question when she was elected was whether or not she would have to sign this thing. That she didn't really want to ban capital punishment, but she may have to for political expediencies. And this was something that the previous President Rodin, kind of set up for her, because like this happened on his watch, and he just kind of decided not to act upon the bill, setting up this tension between Celis Agard and Belleron. Now, during the gate building event, or just after, it was reported that Celis Agard's her request for funding was in fact approved, and she was successful in getting everything she wanted, basically, while still being able to veto the Belleron bill. So she basically dunked Belleron, this Suvio Belleron guy, and the way she did it was with the assistance of Intaki. The Intaki senators were the ones that were credited for, because they sided with her. She was able to push through in spite of the resistance and the demand for her to kowtow to the Belleron bill. So it's interesting that he now is stepping up and calling attention to that very region, right? Because Intaki is like the heart of the Galente Caldari war zone. Inner Circle renews authorization to deploy Aegis boarding units in counter-subversion operations in stations in orbital infrastructure. This goes back, again, it's all about planets. It's all about structures. And more importantly, remember, Aegis was made originally. Aegis was the organization for Nova, like Project Nova, the one that was the shooter that predate the previous iteration of their shooter project before whatever it is now, right? Aegis was created to be like the framework for that game. It was Aegis versus Sancha, more or less. And then when that all fell apart and invasion started, Aegis was kind of repurposed into Edencom. But there's always been this kind of notion about planets, planetary things, boarding parties, etc. The development of new war clone technology, i.e., foot soldiers that have backup personality backup technologies, etc. So this is very, I would like to think of this as another signal that we're getting very close to getting more information about the shooter. Secure Commerce Commission, FTL Network Security Chief summoned before Inner Circle following Foucault's broadcast and FTL communications relay. This is fine. SEC is just the guys in charge of that sort of stuff, so of course he's the one being called in front to answer for what the fuck just happened. Federal Military Command Commissions initiates investigation into Ostakon Agency and Federation military links over the former member of Seratum Foucault. Ooh. Ostrakhan Agency, a mercenary corporation that has made a practice of hiring dishonorably discharged members of the Galente military. The Ostrakhan Agency is considered to be a rather suspect organization by the Galente media and are regularly run stories about its activities. Unperturbed, the agency... I know where I know this from. Unperturbed, the agency carries on its business of contradicting soldiers and other personnel for service in conflict throughout New Eden. Oh, shoot. I'm not showing it all. Sorry. Okay. So, why, what, as soon as I saw this name, I was like, man, I know that from somewhere. No, well, it might have been a Dust Corp, but more importantly, you know the agency? Like, the UI element in-game? The thing that tells you your missions and other things, like the event stuff, your tutorial, the thing I keep saying that they need to repurpose and call it Aura instead? That agency? Yeah, it's called the agency after that agency. Because they bought the agency from Scope, i.e. they bought the distribution rights to communicate Capsuleer, you know, to give Capsuleers basically bounties. They're the ones that got it from Scope. And they've been kind of quiet. And to the point where I've even said that, I've argued this many, many times, that they should just rename it Aura and just totally dump the whole, this whole plot, because like they never went anywhere with this. And so, So they're suggesting that Serenalin Foucault is from there. That's kind of cool. Also, that reminds me of another thing about Serenalin Foucault, which I didn't go into earlier, but hold on. Eve forums. So it's harder to see at this time because, you know, obviously time has passed, but when this post was first made, when this post by Serenalin Foucault was made, we checked on that day, and on that day, his character was created 333 days prior. He had joined the Triglavian Collective, or you know, his current organization, 333 days before his first post on the forums. Not required, or, you know, probably just an Easter egg, but kind of a funny one. So, in fact, let's go ahead and look him up in game. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Known alias of Lieutenant Colonel Simon Val Foucault. So he added the name. He changed his first name. Subcommander, Integer, known member of Integer leadership echelon, claims affiliation with Convocation of Triglav. Integer links with Triglavian collectives conferred by Ecom Intelligence, Concord Directive Intelligence Agency, and Federal Intelligence Office. And then if you go over here to Employment Agency, or Employment History, you'll see that he was part of the Ostakon Agency. He went from the Navy to Crux Special Task Group, which is this is actually a dust group, but this was a very special dust group. This was related to, well, it says so right here. In April YC 108, following certain archaeological discoveries in the Crux constellation, which is one of the reasons why it's kind of interesting that there's archaeological discoveries in the ULI system, the Galente Federation assembled a special task group reporting directly to the Federal Intelligence Office. Whatever the Crux discoveries amounted to has never been made public, and those who led this expedition are currently listed as working for the federal government in various confidential roles. The Crux Special Task Group was eventually privatized under the federal directive and licensed to carry out paramilitary operations in the corporate security sector. Also, the Crux Special Task Group was one of the groups that were used during the Dread attacks by the EOM. So, Also, I believe that this plot was one of the early foreshadowings, or whatever you want to call it, of the original Dust 514 story. So there's kind of a repetition here then. Probably worth noting. Let's see. Amar Empire's Privy Council meets as cultist hunt continues and military circuits under scrutiny and imperial military expansion continues. This is a matter of the continuation of the EOM story. Like, since the EOM event with the Dread attacks, there's basically been an ongoing, what's the word? Inquisition within the Amar Empire. Analysis of visuals of Seriatim Foucault indicates location on occupied Rarivos 3, close to destroyed city of Port Sorum. So this circles back and answers that whole thing about where he's at, right? So Rarivos was the first system to ever fall to the Triglavians. It was the first final liminality. However, Foucault's name suggests, and his association with the Crux Special Task Group suggests that he's Galente. 1 second. I don't know if this is even... Actually, let's go look to Kybernauts.space and look at the invasion information from there. Rarivos, yeah. So Rarivos is an Amarian place, which is why it's an Amarian city. But Foucault is Galente. Now, they have kind of made sure to point out that the Galente, especially the Galente in Vale, have been the most willing to join the Triglavians, as it were. Like, I've always kind of joked around about the fact that the democratic nature of the Galente Federation is such that when the Triglavians came in, the locals there were just like, oh, under new management, that's fine, whatever, and just kept on going. I guess we're part of Triglav now. And so it seems to suggest that Foucault probably lived in Vale, but now has since moved to Rarivos. Is that important? I don't know. They certainly made a point to point it out twice. Edencom Intelligence Directorate issues report noting resilience of local resistance movements in Pochven despite differing approaches of clades. So again, this is just one last little note that's reminding you that this isn't over. That the Pochven is not going smooth sailing. It's not done. There's reason to resist. So, especially with the idea that this quadrant is going to be short, next quadrant is going to be like kicking things off. I think that a lot of this stuff is going to be important as setup. I think that's about it for this. And then next we will go into what we have learned from Holy. So if you're watching this video as the short version of the video, you can check out the other video, or you can check out the longer video that has all of these all together. All of it will be, or is on the YouTube. Without that, on that note, I've been Ashterothi, and I'll see you in space.